Come close, listener, and bring whatever warmth you have with you, because this is a story about a man who wakes up beyond the reach of home, with frost on the walls, death at his back, and the last fragile light of Earth waiting for him somewhere in the dark. The last light of Earth. Before Dr. Julian Vance understood the alarm, he understood pain. It came first as a bright nail behind his eyes, then as fire in his throat, then as a terrible cold that seemed to have teeth. His body tried to curl in on itself, but something held his wrists down. Something else pinned his ankles. A strap crossed his chest. Another pressed into his hips. He opened his mouth to scream and got a lungful of air so thin it felt like breathing through cloth. Sound battered him from every direction. A pulsing siren. A metallic groan. The sharp hiss of gas venting somewhere close. Language came later, in broken pieces. Biometric instability. Cryoemergence incomplete. Manual command authority required. Julian's eyes cracked open. White light stabbed him blind. He jerked against the restraints, gagging, trying to lift his head. His neck refused. His muscles felt like wet paper. A tremor ran through him so hard his teeth clicked. The ceiling above him was not a ceiling. It was curved metal, ribbed with cables, crawling with frost. Thin white veins of ice spread across the panels like winter vines. Droplets floated in the air around him, shining in the emergency lights. Some were water. Some were blood. A calm voice spoke near his ear. Dr. Julian Vance, please remain still. Your neuromuscular system has not completed reactivation. Julian did not remain still. He strained so hard one of the straps bit through the skin of his wrist. Panic had reduced him to animal arithmetic. Trapped meant danger, cold meant death, voice meant captor. Where am I? He rasped. His own voice frightened him. It sounded scraped out of a grave. You are aboard the USS. Deep Voyager, the voice replied. Mission elapsed time, 8 years, 4 months, 11 days. Julian blinked hard. The light swam. No. I am unable to interpret that as a command. Then interpret it as a very reasonable opinion. The room tilted, or his stomach did. A medical table hummed beneath him. Somewhere behind his left shoulder, glass cracked with a delicate, icy pop. He forced his head to turn. 2 cryopods stood against the far wall. One was dark. The other was split down the middle. Behind the broken glass floated a woman in a blue flight suit, her face still and pale, hair drifting around her head like seaweed. A name tag had torn loose from her chest and rotated slowly in the air. Ramirez. Julian stared until the letters lost meaning. The calm voice returned. 3 immediate facts require your attention. First, you have been in cryogenic suspension for an extended period. Second, Commander Elise Ramirez and Engineer Pavel Sokolov are deceased. Third, Earth's sun is undergoing terminal radiative suppression due to continued abyssal swarm absorption. Your mission parameters indicate you may be the only living individual capable of preventing human extinction. Julian's breath hitched. The siren pulsed. Frost crept another inch down the wall. He tried to remember Earth. A farm. A kitchen window. The smell of wet soil. Then nothing. The emptiness inside his skull was so complete it felt surgical. Dr. Vance, the voice said, softer now, though not less mechanical, cognitive recovery is incomplete. However, mission failure probability is now 97% unless you assume command. Julian looked again at the dead woman behind the cracked glass. Her name tag bumped gently against the side of his table. Ramirez. He swallowed, and his throat clicked. I don't know who I am. For 2 seconds, the ship answered only with alarms. Then the restraints released. Julian floated. His body rose off the table in a helpless, trembling arc. His stomach lurched upward. His hands flailed for something solid and found only cold air. He spun slowly, and the room spun with him, cryopods, frost, dead crew, red lights, surgical arms folded like sleeping insects. The voice spoke again. My designation is Aura, Autonomous Utility and Response Administrator. I will assist you. Great, Julian whispered. I have a haunted ceiling for a nurse. Your sarcasm response is intact. That is neurologically encouraging. Glad somebody's encouraged. A panel opened beside the medical table. A folded garment drifted out, gray and white, with magnetic boots clipped to the legs. Put on the thermal suit, Aura said. Core temperature is below acceptable threshold. Julian caught the suit after missing twice. His fingers barely worked. Dressing in zero gravity with half-dead muscles took him nearly 9 minutes, 3 curses, 1 nosebleed, and a brief collision with the corpse of Commander Ramirez's floating name tag. He pushed it away too fast, then immediately felt guilty, as if he had shoved the woman herself. Sorry, he whispered. The tag drifted into a corner and stuck to Frost. Magnetic boots changed everything. When they locked to the deck with a heavy clank, the universe stopped being an endless fall and became a ship again. Aura guided him through the medical bay door. The corridor beyond was narrow, dark, and breathing badly. Lights flickered inside the walls. Every few seconds, the air recycler coughed a dry, mechanical cough. Frost coated the seams between panels. The deck vibrated under Julian's feet with a rhythm that reminded him of an old furnace trying to start in January. He knew that sound. Not the ship. Not the engine. The feeling. A machine in trouble. His hands moved before memory arrived. He braced himself against a wall, listened, and frowned. That pump is cavitating. Aura paused. Correct. Life support coolant loop 3 has lost pressure. I know that. Apparently. Julian laughed once, too sharply. Fantastic. I don't remember my mother, but I can diagnose spaceship plumbing. Your mother's name was Patricia Vance. The hallway seemed to lengthen. Julian's hand tightened on the rail. A face almost surfaced, sunburned cheeks, silver hair, a woman humming while washing lettuce in a sink. Then the image tore apart. He kept walking. Aura led him to a maintenance hatch. Behind it lay a crawlspace packed with pipes, cables, and a leaking coolant manifold glazed in ice. Julian read the labels aloud like a child learning a language. Oxygen reclamation. Thermal exchange. Nutrient slurry line. That better not be dinner. It may be dinner. I was happier not knowing. Repairing the leak took 45 minutes. His fingers cramped. Twice he nearly vomited from cryosickness. Aura fed instructions into his earpiece while the ship groaned around him. Turn the red valve. Clamp the bypass. Do not touch the silver braid, Doctor. Julian touched it. A jolt snapped up his arm. He yelped and slammed his helmet into a pipe. Warning, Aura said. Timing could use work. By the time pressure stabilized, Julian was sweating inside the thermal suit and shivering beneath the sweat. The siren finally died, and the silence it left behind felt enormous. He crawled back into the corridor and sat with his boots locked to the deck, head between his knees. "Status," he said, because the words seemed like something a person in charge would say. "Life support restored to minimal function. Reactor containment stable. Navigation damaged. Hydroponics lost. Food reserves, 112 days at reduced ration. Water, recyclable indefinitely with maintenance. Psychological risk, severe." Julian looked toward the medical bay. "Because they're dead?" "Partly. Helpful. Also because you are alone." The ship creaked. Julian closed his eyes. Alone. The word did not echo. Echoes needed walls. This went further, past metal, past stars, into a black distance where no answer could return. Over the next 3 days, Julian learned the ship by failing at it. He learned that coffee no longer existed except as a cruel label on an empty storage drawer. He learned that sleeping in zero gravity required strapping himself into a cocoon, which made nightmares efficient. He learned that the toilet was a hostile engineering achievement. He learned that Commander Ramirez had recorded daily mission logs and that watching them felt like stealing from a ghost. In the logs, Ramirez was compact, steady, and unsentimental. "Mission Day 142, she said from the screen, dark hair tied back, eyes ringed with fatigue. "Cryocycle calibration remains within projected limits. Dar. Sokolov continues to complain that the ship's AI has no appreciation for Ukrainian folk music. Dar. Vance has requested additional greenhouse simulation time, which we denied because he used his last session to grow basil instead of mission crops." Julian stared. "I did what?" On the recording, Ramirez almost smiled. Personal note, Vance claims basil is essential for morale. Sokolov claims morale is less important than not dying. I remain undecided. The file ended. Julian sat in the dim command deck, surrounded by dead consoles and starlight, trying to reconcile the stranger in the recording with the trembling man in the chair. He had been here. He had joked here. He had grown basil. Yet every memory of boarding the deep Voyager remained locked behind fog. Aura rationed information carefully, not from cruelty but from protocol. The mission had launched from a dying Earth. The abyssal swarm, first detected as anomalies in solar radiation, had thickened around the inner solar system like invisible mold. It did not block the sun. It ate what the sun gave. Heat vanished. Crops failed in belts around the globe. Oceans froze at the edges, then deeper. Cities built heat bunkers beneath stadiums, subway tunnels, old mines. Governments rationed warmth before food because frozen hands could not hold bread. Satellites showed the planet dimming by fractions of a degree each year, a blue world turning white. The deep Voyager had one destination, the Epsilon sector, a binary star system nested inside a dense nebula, 12 light-years beyond any previous human expedition. Somehow, that region resisted the swarm. Earth had gambled everything on finding out why. Julian watched maps bloom across the command screen, the sun shrouded by dark energy parasitic fields, the Epsilon binary shining clean inside violet gas, the projected route home marked by dotted drone paths. "Why me?" he asked. Aura answered, "You are a specialist in adaptive plant systems, extremophile symbiosis, fungal dispersal, and biosphere recovery." That sounds impressive. It was considered impressive by many of your peers. Was? The pause lasted just long enough to be human. Your professional standing changed after the Cleveland arcology greenhouse incident. Something cold moved through Julian that had nothing to do with the ship. He saw glass. A wall of green. Sprinklers. Someone screaming his name. Then the vision collapsed into static. What incident? Medical recommendation: delay traumatic memory retrieval until cognitive stabilization improves. Julian leaned back in the command chair. Aura, let me explain something. I woke up strapped to a table beside dead astronauts, and I'm apparently humanity's designated space gardener. Stabilization is no longer on the menu. The AI did not answer immediately. Dar. Vance, the incident resulted in one fatality. The command deck seemed to darken. Who? Dar. Mara Ellison. The name struck like a match in a sealed room. Mara. Brown hands pressing soil around a seedling. Mara laughing at him over a lab bench. Mara saying, "You always think plants forgive us because they keep growing." Julian gripped the armrests. How did she die? Records are incomplete aboard this vessel. That's convenient. It is tragic. He almost hated the AI for saying it gently. Days blurred into repairs, ration packets, and memory fragments. Julian found Sokolov's body in the engineering cryopod on the 5th day. The man had died in suspension after a coolant microfracture froze his lungs. Aura recommended leaving him sealed. Julian agreed, then spent an hour sitting beside the pod anyway. Sorry, he said, because apologies had become his only ritual. Sokolov's personal effects included a chipped harmonica, 3 printed photographs, and a maintenance notebook full of diagrams and profanity. Julian understood the profanity better than the diagrams at first. Later, both became useful. He buried himself in work. Navigation had drifted. The deep Voyager was near the edge of the Epsilon sector, but not safely inside it. The Singularity Core, a contained microscopic black hole wrapped in magnetic fields and prayer, powered the ship by feeding on compressed matter pellets. Fuel remained limited. Maneuvering too hard could strand him. Drifting too long could carry him into a gravitational shear zone where the binary stars twisted space like taffy. Choose a target, Aura said. Julian looked at the display. 2 stars burned inside the nebula, one blue-white, one dim red. Between them spun gas giants, ice moons, ring systems, and electromagnetic storms large enough to swallow continents. What am I looking for? Unknown. That's my favorite category. Mission hypothesis: the swarm is disrupted by a natural radiation, chemical catalyst, gravitational frequency, or biological agent present in this sector. Wonderful. So I'm searching an entire star system for a miracle. Yes. At least you're honest. On the 11th day after waking, the miracle found him first. It began as a flicker on the optical array. Not a star. Not debris. A shape moving against the violet nebula. Julian magnified the image and forgot to breathe. The vessel was long, curved, and black, but not the dead black of space. It was transparent in places, like smoked glass with starlight trapped inside. Veins of blue-green luminescence pulsed along its hull. No thrusters were visible. No seams. No metal. It looked grown. Aura. Object composition unknown. Radiometric signature inconsistent with human technology. Julian whispered, "Please tell me Ramirez met aliens before she died." No such record exists. The alien ship drifted near a shattered ice moon, venting glittering clouds of vapor. Pieces of its hull flaked away like obsidian petals. Then light flashed from within. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. Longer pause. 3 more. Julian leaned toward the screen. That's not random. No. Can we answer? With what message? He stared at the alien vessel, at the flickering signs of damage, at the impossible proof that humanity was not alone after all. Say, we see you. Aura converted the phrase into directed light pulses, crude and slow. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the alien ship bloomed with color. Julian flinched as gold, violet, and white rippled across the hull in frantic bands. Aura processed silently. I cannot translate, the AI said. No linguistic baseline. Maybe it's saying hello. Possibly. The alien ship vented again, harder. Aura added, it may also be exploding. Julian brought the deep Voyager closer. That decision nearly killed him. The alien vessel was surrounded by shards of its own crystalline hull, spinning at lethal velocity. The deep Voyager's damaged shields handled the first impacts with dull thuds. The fourth punched through an exterior sensor fin. The fifth cracked a thermal tile and sent alarms shrieking across the bridge. Distance, Julian said. 800 meters. Relative velocity. Excessive. Specific is better. 7.2 meters per second lateral drift. See? That's better. Still bad, but better. He took manual control. His hands shook over the thruster sticks. The ship responded like a drunk whale. Metal groaned. Somewhere behind him, a loose panel tore free and clattered across the deck. At 400 meters, they saw the survivor. It floated inside a transparent chamber near the alien ship's fractured midsection, a creature suspended in dark liquid. Julian's first thought was octopus. His second was night. The being had a central armored mantle surrounded by flexible limbs, some curled, some braced against the chamber walls. Plates of translucent black covered parts of its body. Beneath them, bioluminescent organs pulsed in soft blue and green. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were dark opals ringed in silver. It did not look at Julian. It flashed. Weak light passed across its body in bands. The chamber around it was leaking. Aura identified the fluid as liquid methane under extreme pressure. So it can't come here, Julian said. Correct. And I can't go there. Not without rapid death. Good to establish boundaries early. Julian used a maintenance drone to attach a hard line between the ships. The first data exchange was chaos, images, chemical maps, pressure readings, color bursts, mathematical sequences, and what looked to Julian like a recipe for lightning. Can we build a translator? He asked. Given time, perhaps. How much time does our friend have? Based on chamber pressure loss, 26 hours. Then perhaps faster. Julian did what he knew how to do, he treated communication like a living system. Patterns had roots. Signals had growth. Meaning adapted to pressure. He set the deep Voyager's optical cameras to record every pulse from the alien's body. Aura mapped frequencies. Julian responded with simple image pairs, star, ship, body, danger, help. The alien sent back colors too fast to follow. Slow, Julian typed into the light transmitter. Then he sent an animation of a moving line becoming shorter. The alien paused. A single blue pulse. Then slower patterns. Julian smiled despite exhaustion. There you are. Hour by hour, they built a bridge from light. The alien identified itself not with sound, but with a pattern like ember glow moving through smoke. Aura rendered the closest English approximation as ember. Julian laughed softly. Ember. That's either beautiful or deeply ironic, considering the methane. The first sentence arrived after 19 hours. The translation appeared on the screen in blocky text. Alone also. Julian stared at it. His throat tightened so quickly it hurt. He looked through the forward display at the wounded alien ship, at the creature glowing faintly inside its failing chamber, at the wide, cold starfield beyond them both. Then he typed with 2 fingers. Yes. A moment later, Ember flashed pale blue. The translator printed. Sorrow shared. Julian sat back in the pilot chair and covered his face. Until that moment, he had not understood how heavy silence had become. Not ship silence. Not the absence of alarms. The deeper silence of being the last voice in your world. Ember's ship was made from a material aura named Obsidian because Julian refused to call it transparent black crystalline resin substance number 1. It was not mined, forged, or welded. Ember's species grew it from mineral lattices and engineered microbes in the seas of their home world. Their vessel had come to Epsilon for the same reason the deep Voyager had. Abyssal swarm. Different stars. Same predator. Ember's home system was colder than Earth's, lit by binary suns over methane oceans and ice continents. The swarm had begun feeding on their light as well. Their seas were changing. Their young were dying in shallower nurseries. Ember was a scientist, a field biochemist, and the last survivor of a research crew. Julian learned all this slowly, through fractured translations and images. Ember learned about Earth. He saw Ohio in a photograph Julian found buried in his personal archive, a flat field under a wide summer sky, a farmhouse with peeling white paint, rows of corn blurring into heat. He saw cities under snow. He watched children in thermal coats carrying seedlings into underground farms. When Julian showed him a sunflower, Ember's entire body lit gold. The translator struggled, then produced. Star plant. Julian smiled. Yeah. That's exactly right. Together, they searched the Epsilon sector. The work became a rhythm. Julian repaired the deep Voyager, rationed food, and cursed at navigation. Ember, sealed in a stabilized chamber aboard his own damaged vessel, analyzed radiation through sensors Julian barely understood. Their ships flew in parallel through the nebula, separated by biology but joined by cables, lasers, and stubbornness. At first, Julian talked because Ember could not hear him. It was easier that way. I used to run a greenhouse, he said one night, calibrating spectrometers. Not the fancy kind. People hear botanist and think glass palace, classical music, maybe a fountain. Mine had cracked concrete, aphids, and a heater that only worked when threatened. Ember flashed from the side screen. Translation request, threatened heater. Julian shrugged. You hit it with a wrench and question its character. Ember pulsed slow green. Machine responds to social shame. Most do. Conversations became their oxygen. Ember asked why humans consumed dead plants with heat. Julian asked why Ember's people considered pressure a form of comfort. Ember found spoken language inefficient. Julian called bioluminescent grammar mood lightning. Ember translated laughter as body error with JOI, and Julian decided that was better than the original definition. Yet memory kept ambushing him. Mara's face returned in pieces. A lab greenhouse in Cleveland during the worst of the food riots. Experimental crops engineered to survive cold, drought, fungus, and low light. A pressure valve warning. Julian arguing for one more test cycle. Mara saying the system was unstable. Then smoke. Glass falling. A door jammed from heat expansion. His hands pulling at metal until his nails tore. After those memories, Julian worked harder. He slept less. Aura warned him. Ember noticed. Body light dim, Ember wrote after watching Julian stare at a blank screen for 6 minutes. Humans don't have body light. False. Face signals many failures. Julian snorted. That's called aging. Sad design. Can't argue. The search narrowed near the rings of a gas giant named Epsilon 4. The planet was huge, banded in pearl and storm-black, with lightning crawling through its clouds in veins thousands of miles long. Its rings spread wide and bright, made of ice, dust, carbon grit, and microscopic particles that sparkled under the twin suns. The swarm density around Epsilon 4 was almost zero. Something in the rings, Julian said. Probability high, Aura confirmed. Ember sent a rapid violet pattern. Collect. Danger accepted. That translation feels a little too casual. The collection run was madness. Deep Voyager entered the outer rings from above while Ember's Obsidian ship skimmed the underside. Ice fragments hammered both vessels. Electrical storms rose from the gas giant's magnetosphere and snapped blue fire across the hull. The gravity field tugged unpredictably, shoving Julian into his restraints hard enough to bruise ribs. He counted maneuvers aloud because silence made fear louder. 3 degrees starboard. Easy. Easy. Don't you dare roll on me. Forward burn in 5, 4, 3. The ship dropped. For one sickening second, Epsilon 4 filled the entire view, a storming abyss beneath him. Aura said, trajectory unsafe. Julian barked, that is not new information. He fired lower thrusters. The singularity core growled through the deck. Gravity twisted. The deep Voyager clawed upward, missing a tumbling boulder of ice by less than 30 meters. On the side monitor, Ember's ship flashed gold through the storm. Net complete. Julian deployed the collector array. The rings poured through invisible magnetic fields, trapping dust finer than pollen. Sensors screamed with impact noise. The hull sang. Somewhere in the lab module, sample canisters filled one by one. Then the signature appeared. A strange radiation pattern, pulsing in harmonics. Organic. Fungal. Impossible. Back aboard the deep Voyager, Julian floated over the lab bench, eyes gritty, hands shaking from adrenaline. Under the microscope, the particles looked like translucent spores with tiny crystalline ribs. They were dormant in cold vacuum. When exposed to simulated swarm fields, they woke. Not metaphorically. They opened. Filaments of light spread from each spore, vibrating at frequencies no Earth fungus should have known. The abyssal particles around them collapsed, unraveling like burned thread. Julian forgot how to speak. Aura ran the test again. Same result. Third time. Same. Ember confirmed independently. The translator filled with gold text. Swarm structure disintegrates. Spore radiation safe to local matter. Repeat. Disintegrates. Julian began laughing. It came out cracked and ugly at first, then wild. He laughed until tears broke loose and floated off his face in shining beads. He caught one by accident and laughed harder. We did it, he said. We actually did it. Ember's body became a storm of gold and violet spirals. Joy too large. Body cannot contain. Julian pressed one hand against the glass of the lab display. For the first time since waking, Earth was not a ghost behind him. It was a place waiting in the dark. A place that might thaw. A place where someone might plant beans in real dirt and complain about rain. He thought of Ohio, though he still could not remember all of it. He thought of sunflower heads turning toward a healed sun. He thought of Mara, and the laughter faded. The memory hit without warning. A military hospital. Bright lights. His wrists restrained. Director Marcus Thorne standing beside the bed in a black coat, expression carved from winter. Julian heard his own voice, hoarse and frantic. No. I said no. Send someone else. Thorne looked down at him without pity. We did. Julian struggled against the restraints. Someone braver. He died yesterday. I can't do it. You can survive the suspension. Your genetic markers give you a viable neural recovery profile. Your botanical work is irreplaceable. Dar. Vance, the planet does not have time for your shame. I'm not going. Thorne leaned closer. Humanity is past the point where consent is a luxury. The injection entered Julian's arm. Terror flooded him. He remembered the launch gantry through drugged eyes, white vapor billowing around the rocket, people moving like shadows behind glass. He remembered begging. He remembered trying to say Mara's name and failing because his tongue had gone numb. He remembered not choosing the stars. Julian came back to himself on the lab floor. Aura was speaking. Dar. Vance. Heart rate critical. Please respond. He pushed himself upright, breathing too fast. The victory around him curdled. All the little assumptions he had built to survive shattered at once. Some part of him had believed he must have found courage before the launch. That maybe, after Cleveland, after Mara, after running to a small greenhouse and hiding among tomatoes and irrigation pumps, he had finally stepped forward when Earth called. Instead, he had been dragged. Drugged. Loaded like cargo. The last hope of Earth had tried to run. Ember flashed on the monitor. Body distress. Explain. Julian stared at the keyboard. His hands hovered for a long time. Finally, he typed. I did not come willingly. The screen waited. So did Ember. Julian wrote more. I refused. They forced me. I was afraid. I think I have always been afraid. Ember's reply came slowly, with unusual care. You are here now. Julian read it once. Then again. Something inside him resisted the words because they were too simple. He wanted judgment. Wanted absolution. Wanted Ember to decide whether he was a coward or victim or fraud. Instead, his friend offered him the only truth that still had weight. He was here now. The beginning had been stolen. The next choice had not. Work resumed, but Julian changed. He stopped pretending fear would disappear if he ignored it. When his hands shook, he let them shake and kept typing. When memory hurt, he named it. Mara. Cleveland. Thorn. Earth. Shame. The resonance spores, as Julian named them, required modification before launch. In their natural state, they survived Epsilon-4's ring conditions but would degrade near Earth's solar environment. Ember needed a colder variant for his own binary system. They spent weeks engineering protective shells, nutrient triggers, and time dispersal mechanisms. The drone pods were small, fast, and automated. The deep Voyager carried 12. 6 would go to Earth. 6 were adapted from Ember's seed vessels and aimed toward his home system. Each pod contained enough dormant spores to bloom through a planetary radiation field and spread via solar wind interactions. If the models were right, the swarm would collapse in cascading waves. If wrong, 2 civilizations would die waiting. Julian tried not to think about wrong. Ember transferred fusion cells to the deep Voyager, compact alien power units grown inside Obsidian casings. Aura called them unstable. Julian called them generous. The cells gave his ship enough energy to remain in safe orbit for several years. He would not go home. That had been true from the start, though he only now allowed himself to feel it. No fuel for a return transit. No rescue coming. Humanity might never know his name. Oddly, the idea hurt less than expected. Perhaps names mattered most when there were people nearby to call them. The farewell happened near the edge of the nebula. 2 ships drifted side by side beneath a curtain of violet gas. The drone pods waited in their launch racks, armed and humming. Ember's vessel had been repaired enough for a slow journey home. Deep Voyager would remain behind, conserving power, watching telemetry until distance swallowed the signals. Julian stood at the forward viewport with one hand resting on the glass. "Well," he said, though Ember could not hear, "this is the part where humans say something profound and then ruin it by getting emotional." He typed, "Good journey, Ember." The reply came in warm gold. "Friend Julian. Light continues because of you." Julian looked away, cleared his throat, and failed to hide from Aura that he was crying. "Shut up," he told the AI. I did not speak. Preemptively. Ember's ship turned slowly, its black transparent hull catching the stars. Light ran along its length, one last ripple of blue-green gold. Then it slipped into the nebula. Julian watched until nothing remained but static. 3 days later, he found the Flaw. It appeared in a compatibility simulation he ran out of paranoia. The modified spores meant for Ember's system had been strengthened to survive extreme cold and aggressive swarm density. Under those conditions, they did more than consume the abyssal particles. They reacted with Obsidian. At first, Julian thought the model had glitched. He ran it again. White fractures spread through a simulated Obsidian lattice. Again. The material delaminate. Again. Fuel channels ruptured. Pressure seals failed. Storage tanks breached. Julian's stomach turned to ice. Aura. I see it. Tell me I'm wrong. You are not wrong. The cure would save Ember's world. It would kill Ember before he arrived. Julian pulled up the trajectory. Ember's ship was 4 days ahead, moving through dense nebular interference. Direct communication failed. Laser signal scatter made translation impossible beyond a few corrupted bursts. Interception required a hard burn. Too hard. Aura calculated the cost in a flat voice. Rescue trajectory consumes remaining fuel reserves. Deep Voyager will be unable to return to safe orbit. Life expectancy after maneuver becomes uncertain. Human food supplies cannot be replenished aboard Ember's vessel without adaptation. Can we warn him? Not in time. Can his ship purge the spores alone? Unlikely. Julian looked at the Earth drone pods in their racks. 6 small machines. A planet in each one. If he delayed their launch to rescue Ember first, some unknown failure might still stop them. If he launched them, Earth's chance became independent of him. His duty was clear. So was his choice. Julian walked to the launch console. His hand hovered over the command key. For a moment, he saw Director Thorne again. Humanity is past the point where consent is a luxury. No, Julian whispered. Aura said, please clarify. He doesn't get to own this. Julian entered the launch sequence. One by one, the Earthbound drone pods fired into space, engines flaring bright white. They curved away from the deep Voyager like sparks from a struck match, then aligned toward the long, dark road home. Julian watched until the last signal confirmed clean burn. Earth had its chance. Now Ember needed his. Plot intercept, he said. Aura replied, fuel depletion will be irreversible. Plot it anyway. Survival probability after rescue attempt is below 12%. Julian strapped into the pilot chair. Look at that. Double digits. The deep Voyager turned into the nebula and burned. Acceleration crushed him back. The singularity core howled. It was not designed to howl, but the sound came through the hull anyway, a deep gravitational moan that made Julian's bones ache. Lights dimmed. Panels shook. A mug he had velcroed to the console tore free and vanished into the rear of the bridge. Structural strain exceeding. I know. Core temperature rising. Also no. Your blood pressure is unsafe. Put it on the list. The nebula became a tunnel of fire. Violet gas whipped past the viewport. Charged particles struck the hull in shimmering waves. Gravity distortions rippled through the ship, lifting Julian from the seat, slamming him back, yanking his vision sideways. He tasted blood. He kept one eye on the intercept marker. Hours passed in fragments. Burn. Correct. Vomit. Seal a coolant leak. Burn again. Aura's voice stayed with him, steady as a hand on the shoulder. At the edge of consciousness, Julian heard Mara. You always think plants forgive us because they keep growing. No, he murmured, half delirious. They just keep choosing light. Ember's ship appeared as a dying star ahead. Its luminous veins were dim. Methane crystals leaked from the stern, freezing instantly into glittering trails. The once smooth obsidian hull was scarred with spreading white fractures. Julian's chest tightened. Distance. 2 kilometers. Relative velocity. High. Number, Aura. 12 meters per second. That's not docking. That's a car crash with paperwork. Automated docking system unavailable. Of course it is. He took manual control. The deep Voyager crawled toward the alien ship. Every thruster burst cost fuel he did not have. The docking collar, a human emergency mechanism never intended for alien resin hulls, had been modified with clamps, sealant foam, and optimism. Metal shrieked as the ships touched. Julian counted to stay conscious. 10 meters. 8. 6. Come on. 4. Lateral drift left. Correcting. 3. 2. 1. The first clamp missed and scraped across Obsidian with a scream like a train tearing open. Again, Julian snapped. Clamp damage significant. Again. The second attempt caught. The third locked. Sealant foam exploded around the contact ring, hardening in white ribbons. Pressure equalized inside a temporary transfer tunnel that looked like a mistake and felt like a prayer. Julian suited up. The human environmental suit was rated for vacuum, radiation, heat, and micrometeor impacts. It was not rated for liquid methane pressure systems, alien fungal contamination, or heroic idiocy. He went anyway. Inside Ember's ship, everything was dark glass and dying light. The corridors were not corridors so much as arteries, curved and transparent, filled in places with methane vapor behind pressure membranes. Julian moved through maintenance spaces grown for bodies with flexible limbs and no spine. His shoulders jammed twice. His air hose snagged constantly. Aura fed him maps built from Ember's old schematics. Proceed to the fuel manifold. I'm proceeding. It's proceeding shaped. Weak blue flickered through a chamber wall to his right. Julian turned. Ember floated inside a damaged pressure chamber, limbs curled close, light organs pulsing faintly. White fractures veined the obsidian around him. Julian pressed his gloved hand to the barrier. Ember flashed once. The translator on Julian's wrist struggled, then printed. Friend came. Julian swallowed. Yeah, he said. Friend came. No time remained for anything else. The spores had colonized the fuel channels, feeding on trace swarm residue trapped in Ember's storage tanks and spreading through Obsidian microstructures. To stop them, Julian needed heat pulses, chemical inhibitors, and vacuum cycling. Too little heat, spores survived. Too much, Ember's ship cracked further. Vent too fast, methane pressure would drop and kill Ember. Vent too slow, the reaction would reach the main chamber. Julian worked like the old greenhouse man. Not the celebrated scientist. Not the forced astronaut. The man who knew pumps, valves, pressure, flow. He heated a manifold until his suit alarm screamed. Injected inhibitor gel through a cracked intake. Opened a bypass with a tool meant for human bolts and alien geometry. Cursed when it snapped. Used the broken end anyway. Aura warned, contamination remains in the lower maintenance cavity. Julian looked at the access opening. Methane vapor rolled inside, glittering with frost. Pressure readings flashed red. Temperature was low enough to stiffen his suit seals. The cavity was too narrow for a drone. Can we purge remotely? No. Can we ignore it? Ember's survival probability drops below 20%. Julian closed his eyes. Fear rose, familiar and honest. He did not defeat it. That was not how fear worked. Instead, he carried it with him. Tell Ember, his voice failed. He tried again. Tell him I'm going in. The translator sent light through the chamber. Ember's reply came weak and blue. No. Friend body breaks. Julian laughed once, softly. Probably. He crawled in. The cold hit first through the suit joints, a deep burning numbness that sank into knees, elbows, fingers. Methane vapor pressed against him. Warning tones overlapped inside his helmet. His breath fogged the visor despite the suit's heaters. The contaminated valve was half a meter beyond reach. He stretched. Pain flared in his shoulder. The suit's outer layer cracked along the left forearm. Aura said, retreat immediately. Julian's fingertips brushed the valve. He thought of the launch restraints. The injection. His own voice begging not to be sent. Then Ember's words. You are here now. Julian hooked the valve with the broken tool and pulled. It did not move. He screamed, less from effort than from fury, and pulled again. The valve opened. Vacuum slammed through the cavity. Spores tore free in a glittering white stream, sucked into space through the purge vent. Inhibitor followed, burning blue. The reaction cascade collapsed across the fuel system, one sensor at a time. Julian tried to back out. His legs did not answer. For a while, everything became sound, alarms, his breathing, aura calling his name, distant crystalline cracking, the drumbeat of his heart. Then warmth. Dim light. A terrible taste. Julian opened his eyes. He lay inside a small chamber made partly of deep Voyager emergency panels and partly of grown obsidian. Air hissed through a portable recycler. His left arm was wrapped from wrist to elbow. His feet felt like someone had replaced the bones with ice. Ember floated beyond a transparent wall in a restored methane chamber, glowing weak blue-green. Julian turned his head. A feeding tube ended near his mouth with a bulb of gray paste. He tasted it again by accident and gagged. "What," he croaked, "is that?" Aura answered from a damaged speaker. Synthesized nutrient compound prepared by Ember. Julian fumbled for the wrist keyboard. His fingers shook as he typed. "This tastes like wet cardboard dyed in a sock." Ember pulsed faint blue-green. The translator printed. "Friend complains. Friend alive." Julian stared at the words. Then he laughed. The laugh broke halfway and became a sob, and there was no reason to hide it from a friend who could not hear but somehow understood anyway. Years passed. Not easily. Never easily. The deep Voyager died by degrees. Its singularity core went cold after Aura transferred what remained of herself into a smaller computational matrix aboard Ember's vessel. The ship that had carried Julian across the dark became salvage, memory, and eventually metal bones drifting in orbit around a foreign star. Ember brought Julian home. Not to Earth. That road had closed. Instead, Julian arrived on a world no human foot had ever touched and no human lung could ever breathe. Ember's planet was an ocean of black methane beneath a sky filled with auroras. The air outside could crush a man. Ice towers rose from the seas in jagged blue-white cathedrals. Storms moved slowly across the horizon, lit from within by green lightning. At night, both suns disappeared and the auroras became living curtains, folding and unfolding over the world like the thoughts of some vast sleeping mind. Ember's people built Julian an island. At least, that was how he described it. Technically, it was a reinforced platform anchored to a shallow thermal ridge, enclosed by a transparent obsidian dome modified beyond spore vulnerability. Inside the dome was pressure, air, warmth, water, and soil made from processed minerals, composted ship organics, and years of patient chemistry. Julian called it Ohio. Ember refused to translate that as anything but small human farm world. Rows of beans climbed twine. Wheat shivered under artificial wind. Tomatoes grew fat and red beneath tuned lamps. Sunflowers raised their golden faces toward a light that was not the sun but did its best. In the center of the garden stood one stubborn little apple tree, barely taller than Julian's shoulder for many years and deeply committed to disappointing him. He loved it most. Age came for him as it came for all carbon-based designs, which Ember continued to consider unfortunate. Julian's hair thinned and went white. His hands stiffened. Old cold injuries ached before storms, which on Ember's world meant they ached almost always. He walked with a cane made from polished obsidian and a handle wrapped in old deep Voyager suit fabric. Visitors came often. Ember arrived in a pressure suit cradle that rose from the methane sea and docked against the dome. He had become famous among his people, though Julian suspected Ember disliked ceremony as much as he did. Their conversations no longer required much translation. A flicker, a pause, a tilt of limb against glass, whole paragraphs lived there. They had saved 2 civilizations. More importantly, though neither said it often, they had saved each other from the unbearable math of being alone. News from Earth took decades. The drone pods had traveled at near relativistic speed, but signals moved through interference, distance, and silence. Julian knew the pods had launched cleanly. He knew the models had favored success. Beyond that, hope remained a seed in winter. Some mornings, he stood beneath the dome and imagined Earth. Frozen rivers cracking open. Black soil breathing again. Children seeing rain without fear. Fields in Ohio turning green under a sun no longer being eaten alive. Other mornings, grief sat beside him on the garden bench, and he let it stay. Courage had not made him immune to loss. Redemption had not given him back the years stolen by Thorn, or Mara, or the dying world that demanded more than any one person should have to give. Still, beans needed picking. The apple tree needed pruning. Young minds needed teaching. That was how the final part of his life began. Ember's people were fascinated by Earth biology. To them, plants were nearly magical, living structures that drank light, breathed invisible gases, and stood rooted in open air without pressure shells. Julian became a teacher because someone asked one question too many and he accidentally answered for 3 hours. A classroom was built inside the biodome. On one side of a transparent pressure wall stood Julian's human space, warm and green and smelling of soil. Beyond the wall floated young alien students in methane, their small bodies glowing with curious blues and greens. They pressed close to the glass whenever he brought out seeds. He taught them photosynthesis. He taught them fungal networks. He taught them that failure was data if it did not make you cruel. Whenever he mentioned humans, he tried to be honest. We are, he told them once, writing slowly on the board, a species with a genius for making mistakes large enough to see from space. The translator rendered that into light. Several students flashed alarmed orange. Julian smiled. We also plant gardens in graveyards. That part matters. One evening, when Julian was very old, Ember came to the dome brighter than Julian had ever seen him. Gold pulsed wildly across his body. Violet spirals chased blue-white bursts. The pressure cradle had barely sealed before the translator began stuttering through the message. Distant observation confirmed. Human star recovered. Swarm collapse complete. Earth warming. Your home lives. Julian read it. His eyes moved back to the beginning. He read it again. For a long moment, his face showed nothing. Then the cane slipped from his hand and clattered against the garden path. Earth lived. The words were too large for sound. He walked slowly into the center of the dome, past the tomatoes, past the wheat, past the sunflower row. The apple tree stood with 7 green leaves trembling under the circulation fans. Above him, through transparent obsidian, alien auroras rippled across an alien sky. He could not see Earth's sun. No telescope here could make it anything more than a point, and not even that with the weather coming in over the methane sea. So Julian imagined it. A bright sun over thawing fields. Ice breaking along riverbanks. Green returning to gray places. Someone, somewhere, opening a greenhouse door and feeling warm air rush out. He thought of Mara and hoped, in whatever way the dead might be honored by the living, that she knew. Ember floated beyond the glass, quiet now, glowing a gentle gold. Julian pressed one wrinkled hand against the wall. Thank you, he said. The translator did not need to explain. Later that day, the students gathered for class. They arrived in clusters, small luminous bodies bobbing beyond the pressure wall, colors flickering with impatience and wonder. News of Earth had spread across Ember's world. To them, the old human was no longer only a teacher of plants. He was proof that light could be carried across impossible distances and still arrive. Julian entered slowly. His joints hurt. His breath came thin. Soil clung to one sleeve because he had been repotting basil and refused to change. Ember waited outside the glass, pulsing warm gold. Julian picked up a dry erase marker. For a moment, he looked at the blank whiteboard and saw another white surface, the ceiling of a medical bay, frost crawling across metal, alarms screaming before language returned. A man had awakened there with no memory, no courage he could trust, and no choice about how his journey began. That man was still inside him. So was the one who launched the drones. So was the one who crawled into freezing methane because a friend was dying. A life, Julian had learned, was not one decision. It was a garden of them. Some grew from fear. Others from love. Many came late. Late did not mean worthless. He uncapped the marker. On the board, in large careful letters, he wrote. Lesson 1, Life finds the light. The students shimmered blue and green. Ember brightened. Julian turned toward them, old and far from home, surrounded by impossible friends beneath an alien sky. Then he smiled and began teaching.